At Douglas Aviation, a team of engineers led by Ed Heinemann, designer of the SBD Dauntless, were tasked to make a successor to it and Curtis's Helldiver for the Navy, seeking for something advanced enough for the new Essex-class fleet carriers. They designed the XSB2D. A procurement request for XSB2D-1s was sent in by an enlisted personnel on June 12, 1941, being marked with identifiers Logistics, Procurement, and Specifications. Heinemann was given a contract to produce 2 XSB2D-1s under contract NOS-88707 on June 30, 1941. His team at Douglas's El Segundo plant were fired up about it, wanting to show that they could build the best dive bombers for the Navy. The Navy's contract came with a suite of requirements which irked Heinemann, but with pressure from the overall situation and patriotic overzealousness, he agreed to them. Before the aircraft was finished, the Navy gave a contract for 13 aircraft on the 9th of April, 1942. The XSB2D-1 was a rather heavy dive bomber. Powered by a 2,300 horsepower Wright R3350 engine, it weighed in at a gross weight of 14,371 pounds, just a little lighter than the TBF Avenger. It had the rather impressive capability of being able to carry 2 torpedoes at once, along with a suite of other bomb-based payloads, and had an offensive armament of 2 20mm cannons. It had 2 rather strange turrets, remote-controlled, but carrying just one 50 cal each. With such a robust system, you'd expect more. Hearing about the aircraft, naval aviators were licking their chops over the SB2D ever since they'd heard of it because she carries torpedoes, according to Commander C.R. Brown, Air Officer of the USS Saratoga, on June 4th, 1942. He describes the fleet wants a dive bomber that can carry a torpedo and can go as far and as fast as possible, whether or not it's one-seater or 2, though preferring the rear gun protection. The first XSB2D was completed on the 17th of March, 1943, and took off on the 8th of April that same year, flown by Laverne Brown, aka the Hollywood star Tailspin Tommy, nicknamed after he played the character. Or how he preferred to be called, Brownie. He noted, "She's nothing to write home about," and Heinemann himself described the aircraft as a turkey. It proved to be faster than the Helldiver and could carry more bombs. Seeing this, the Navy granted Douglas an increase from 13 production SB2D-1s to 345. Soon after, though, the Navy found that due to its air superiority, carrier-based bombers no longer needed defensive armament and canceled the program in June of 1944. They revised the program, instead for a single-seat carrier bomber. They contracted a slew of designs, but wanted Douglas to try out a single-seat version of the SB2D-1 and to convert all production SB2D-1s in development to this new variant. This resulted in the BTD-1 Destroyer. The removed weight of the extra seat and turret led to an increase in fuel capacity by 90 gallons, and better armor. Little about the airframe itself had been changed, allowing them to switch production over quickly. Its turnaround time allowed the first destroyer to be completed on the 15th of February, 1944, and flown on the 5th of March, just over a year after the first XSB2D-1. A good friend of Heinemann, Commander J.A. Thomas, came down to fly it. After extensively testing it, he was genuinely pleased with how it flew, and recommended testing it at the Navy's Test Center, Patuxent River, Maryland, which the BTD underwent. It was also tested at the Ames laboratory, it being said that the Ames laboratory probably spent more time on the BTD-1 than on any other single airplane. This wasn't all though. Making their first jet-powered aircraft, Douglas developed the XBTD-2, a further modification of the aircraft to have both the Wright R-33350-14 radial engine, but also a Westinghouse WE-19XA turbojet in the rear fuselage, looking at another 50 miles per hour of power out of it. 2 were made, the first being completed just a month after the BTD-1, and was flown just 2 months after it too. Unfortunately, it wasn't what they hoped it to be. The extra 1,500 pounds of thrust from the jet didn't help as the installation failed when flying over 200 miles per hour, and further development was cancelled. Heinemann tells in his biography about how Douglas was in a competition with Martin, Fleetwing, and Curtiss for this contract. Summer 1944, the Navy scheduled meetings with these companies. Various naval officials gathered in a cool, air-conditioned room by the reflecting pool between the Washington Monument and Lincoln Memorial. With Heinemann was his assistant, Leo Delvin, aerodynamics expert Gene Rood, and BTD project engineer Ride Bogert. The meeting was a lengthy discussion on whether or not the Navy should keep the BTD project alive. The engineers at the El Segundo plant needed a contract if they wanted to keep their jobs. A long back-and-forth debate ensued. Heinemann said to himself, "This thing has turned into a debate, and no one is about to win it." During a break, he told the Navy head of R&D Division, Leslie C. Stevens, and Captain Paul Ramsey from Patuxent that he had something to present. They were skeptical, but they agreed, and he was introduced by Colonel Fike. Heinemann requested the cancellation of the BTD contract, and he requested to use the funds for a new aircraft, one Heinemann had been thinking up in the previous weeks. He wanted 30 days to drop a design to present, but Admiral Richardson gave him till 9 o'clock the next day. He quickly called Douglas's El Segundo and Santa Monica offices, and then he, along with Delvin and Rood, grabbed a cab and rushed to the Statler Hotel, where they worked through the night on a diet of sandwiches and coffee. Finishing at 3 in the morning, they caught 4 hours of sleep, ordered copies of the documents and presented it to Neutral Reactions, but he got permission to use the BTD's remaining funds for the aircraft, designated as the BT-2D, the prototype for the Douglas A1 Skyraider, a legendary aircraft, which incorporated the good features and overcame the inherent difficulties of the XSB2D and BTD. Heinemann wrote about the XSB2D, "I have no good feelings for that plane, most likely including the BTD in that assessment." He then went on to describe the A1 as a pleasure all the way. One of the XSB2D-1s crashed on January 10, 1946 in Moffett Field, California, due to an engine fire. Flown by George Cooper, he made an emergency landing in a Sunnyvale prune orchard, cutting down 84 trees in the process. Both Cooper and test engineer Gasek survived unharmed. The farmer, who was friends with Cooper, was surprised to see him climb out of the cockpit, where Cooper said to him, "You keep asking me to drop in on you sometime, so here I am." I stumbled across a couple photos of a crashed XSB2D in 1943. Its markings differ than any other XSB2D image I've seen, and appears to sport the 03552 bureau number the second XSB2D would have been given. The writing on the image also labels it as the XSB2D1-2, which is a designation I've not seen elsewhere. Some things to note about the image is that below where I believe the bureau number is a 2, along with another 2 written on the tail. But I've been able to find no information on any other crashes of this model of aircraft during this time. The BTDs had various fates. The first one was actually rescued and restored, initially by the wings of the Eagles Museum, and then at the Museum of Flight in Rome, Georgia, where it sits today. At least one of them was used to test an interesting air brake configuration described as a 6-segment banana peel. Some were used by the NACA. One was unfortunately used in the demonstration of a new firefighting jeep for use aboard carriers in 1952, where it was set on fire. This was another aircraft that finds much of its popularity from War Thunder. I'd love to see the XSB2D-1 or XBTD-2 in the game, though I'm not sure how they'd be implemented. Something I'd love to point out to you War Thunder players to ruin this aircraft for you is how tilted the tail section is. This wasn't even how the aircraft was designed. The real aircraft only had slight tilting. One last thing I'd like to bring up is that I'm working on adding all of my sources into lists on archive.org, uploading what I can myself. My account has been added to the card link in my bio, along with my other socials if you want to check them out.